G'day guys, this is Tier and welcome back to another Fallout 76 video. Now I'm not necessarily going to be teaching you anything in this video or giving you a guide like I normally do. I just want to talk about a topic that has been the subject of debate for a while within the community. You may have heard about it. We are going to be talking about the Gatling plasma and its muzzle options, so let's get into it. Okay, so we will be discussing how the Gatling plasma's projectile is all over the place and completely messed up depending on what muzzle you attach on it. For simplicity's sake, I'll break down the issue and showcase how each muzzle affects the projectile that we fire. Firstly, we have the default Gatling plasma. As you can see here, there is no muzzle equipped, and when we fire it, it spins up and erupts a load of green plasma bolts. Also, notice how when the bolts hit an object or the ground or an enemy, they erode in a green mist. This is standard, this is normal, and this is what we should all be expecting and be aware of. But from there, it gets a little bit weirder. Next up, we have the beam focuser. Things don't change much here. As you can see, it still fires green plasma bolts, but you may notice that when the plasma actually hits a target, they erode into a red mist instead of green. I'm not sure why this happens exactly, but since I have messed around in the creation kit on Fallout 4, I do know that beam focusers do modify the weapon with a projectile override. So with that, I can only assume that this is a leftover effect from the Gatling laser beam focuser projectile override, since the Gatling plasma beam focuser is a direct copy and paste of the Gatling laser beam focuser, mechanically speaking of course. This is just one oddity with the Gatling plasma and its muzzles, but it's not the weirdest one. However, I thought it was still worth mentioning nonetheless. Next up is the whole reason that I'm making this video to begin with, the beam splitter. Now, for anyone of you that has ever used a laser rifle or plasma rifle or even a Tesla rifle, I'm betting you'd expect a beam splitter to, actually split the initial projectile and turn the weapon into a multi-pellet projectile shotgun-like weapon. Well, that's not the case here. Nope. As you can see, while we have the beam splitter muzzle on the Gatling plasma, we will be firing a stream of green hot plasma fire. This is the same projectile that you'd expect to see out of plasma rifles with the flamethrower muzzle. So why is this happening here? This is clearly some type of mistake and something somewhere along the lines have gone wrong, right? Well, not entirely. First of all, the muzzle does split the projectile. You may not be able to tell by looking at it, but you are firing 5 separate streams of plasma flames. As I shoot this behemoth, you can see multiple damage numbers coming from different locations on the behemoth's body, and as I shoot this object, you should be able to see a few different impact markers on the rock. Also, it states in the files right here that it does fire 5 projectiles, so go figure, it still fires 5 projectiles, it is still splitting the projectile. So technically the beam splitter muzzle is doing what it's supposed to be doing, so why the hell is it also shooting plasma fire instead of plasma bolts? Well, I'm not too sure there. Nobody is sure, and depending on who you ask, you will get different answers ranging from, it's supposed to be like that, or it's bugged, or there was an accident by the devs. So yeah, I'm just going to ignore what everyone else thinks about this, and I'm going to share what I think is going on, based off of what the actual evidence within the files says. First of all, the green plasma fire stream is actually what's known as a projectile override. This means that when you attach this Gatling plasma beam splitter muzzle onto the Gatling plasma, it will override the default projectile, which is a green plasma bolt, with this here new projectile called the plasma flamer stream projectile. And no matter what you may think, this is no accident. I realistically can't see how a developer would accidentally put this projectile override into the muzzle slot instead of a regular projectile or default projectile. But then again, Bethesda have accidentally, quote unquote, done weirder things in this game. So, what's going on? I personally think that this muzzle was probably going to be a regular beam splitter, firing actual plasma bolts just 5 ways, 5 projectiles. But somewhere down the line, one of the developers that worked on this weapon decided to make the muzzle convert into a flamer type mod, and they probably simply forgot to change the number of projectiles the mod made you fire, and forgot to change the name of this mod into something like Flamer instead of Beam Splitter. To put it simply, we know that the Beam Splitter is firing 5 projectiles like a Beam Splitter should, but it's just using a weird Plasma Flamer projectile override instead of regular projectiles like you would expect it to use, since the title of the mod is Beam Splitter, not Plasma Flamer. It honestly just seems like there was a little bit of miscommunication whilst creating the muzzle for this Gatling plasma. So what can be done from here? Well, honestly, I don't see Bethesda altering, changing, or fixing this issue anytime soon, but if they did, then I see no other options to fix it other than this. Bethesda should delete the beam splitter muzzle projectile override from the muzzle files, so that it will no longer shoot the plasma flamethrower streams of fire. Then this weapon will function correctly like a regular beam splitter should, and for reference sake, this means that it will work pretty much the same way a plasma infused pepper shaker works. As you can see here, look at all those green plasma bolts. This is how the Gatling plasma would work if it didn't have that plasma flamethrower projectile override. But in saying that, this option doesn't fix everything, because it is clear that some people in the community do like the plasma flamer mod, and clearly some dev somewhere decided it belonged on this weapon at some point in its creation. So in the same fix, I also propose that they implement a third muzzle option that specifically converts this weapon into a single streamed flamer weapon, so that would mean we can have a proper beam splitter on the Gatling plasma that isn't limited to the range of a flamer, and then we could also have a single projectile firing Gatling plasma flamer that doesn't have its damage divided between its streams of projectiles. I think that's the best option, and it's the best way to keep everyone happy, as it honestly works both ways. It gives us both options. Doing that would give us a proper beam splitter and a proper flamethrower mod for the Gatling plasma. So yeah, those are my solutions, and I hope Bethesda actually fixes this at some point in the future, although I'm not going to hold my breath. Now that all that is out of the way and covered, I'll get to the elephant in the room. As I know some of you are just screaming at your screens hoping I mention it, yes, explosive Gatling plasmas exist, and no, the change I've proposed won't affect how they work, unfortunately. As you can see here, no matter what muzzle I use on a Gatling plasma, it will always fire a yellow default explosive bullet projectile. This is because the explosive effect itself on weapons is a projectile override as well, and this override just takes precedence over all of the other projectile overrides that are on the game. That is why when you have an explosive Gatling plasma with a beam splitter, you will not shoot streams of fire. As you can see, you do have the range of a normal weapon and are shooting 5 exploding bullets. So that means that the change I'm proposing to the beam splitter will leave the explosive legacy Gatling plasmas unchanged. It only would affect and benefit non-explosive variants of this weapon, which I think we can all agree is a good thing. Let me recap for anyone that got confused just there. This change I'm proposing to fix the muzzles is only going to benefit non-explosive versions of the Gatling plasma. And that's a good thing, since this weapon is considerably weaker without the legacy explosive effect. Okay, so that's going to do it for me. Just an oddity within the game that I wanted to talk about, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. A massive shout out to all of my current patrons and members. You legends help fuel the content on this channel, so thank you for your support. If you'd like to become a member or become a patron, then be sure to check that out in the description along with my other social medias. And be sure to subscribe and like the video if you did enjoy. I've been Tia, and I'll catch you in the next one. Welcome to Valhalla.